I want to talk about counterspells
Mm-hmm.
and the art of magic not happening.
All right.
So, counterspells, I think we're all pretty familiar with those in the game.
Just a little bit.
Just a bit. You've probably had a spell or two countered here and there. Maybe you've done some countering, possibly.
Not me.
I mean, not me either.
No. I want to explain that the little color, the mana cost we have on our frame here.
Oh, you mean the fact that we're Sultai?
Yes, the blue is your color.
Yeah,
identity.
it is. I mean, I'm primarily...
I'm all about Golgari.
I'm primarily black aligned, but I'm not above using blue to get what I want, so...
I mean, I'll play Muldrotha through the Grave
Yeah, I was
on
like, you
occasion,
have a Sultai.
but... Anyway.
But, yeah, I love a good counterspell.
Yeah, that's
and I think my favorite is Counterspell, the most archetypal, original counter-target spell effect. It shows up in Alpha. It only costs 2 blue, and it just hard counters any spell being cast.
Yeah. Like, you see the t-shirts that have just, like, the blue mana symbol, and it says,
Yes.
nope. Like, it is... That is what blue is known for.
That's
Whether that's
it.
entirely fair or not, it's also got a lot of card draw and some other
It does a lot of other things.
It's about.
Yeah. But
the
like when you
counterspells-
tell somebody about blue, or you talk about blue players, what do you think about
Is
it?
there a color other than blue that has that strong of an identity?
I think maybe green being stompy. That's kind of the... But
it's
still,
also
that's
rampy.
more... Yeah,
I don't know.
Blue being about counter magic does feel a little unfair in that it does a lot of other things. It doesn't...
All right.
You know, but that is...
Legitimately true. But
But that's what most people think of
yeah.
when you talk about blue
It makes an
magic.
impression.
It does. It does make an impression. And Counterspell is one of just the most beautiful ways to do that. It only costs 2 blue. The original art for it is beautiful in terms of illustrating a spell fizzling. One of the things I noticed as I looked through various arts for Counterspell and other counter magic cards is that for the most part, they depict a caster using their hands, making some kind of gesture, and energy or light or whatever you want to call it, kind of fizzling in midair in front of them. So we see that very clearly in this beautiful art by Mark Poole. The caster obviously looks really sad that whatever he was trying to do has been foiled.
Poor guy.
Yeah, poor guy. What a tragedy. And we see that repeated through various iterations of this card. Counterspell has been reprinted quite a few times with varying art. One of my personal favorites is the one from Mercadian Masks. Again, we have someone holding their hands out kind of like this, sort of looking down, just sad, and flavor text kind of giving us an idea of what's happening. Your attack has been rendered harmless. It is, however, quite pretty. And we kind of see that. I think that's maybe where some of the stereotyping of blue players come from, is a lot of these cards have really petty...
It was guided by the art team at Wizards, or the flavor text writers.
A lot of the flavor text is petty, kind of disdainful. I don't think there's enough energy to call it contemptuous.
Oh, I think there might be.
I think it requires more passion to get to contempt, because most of this is dismissive.
Okay, so maybe if it's like a blue-red counterspell.
Yeah, that might be where the...
Contempt feels like a black thing, too.
It does. It just feels there's more energy in it. Yeah. Most of this stuff is pretty dismissive. One of the things we'll see is the caster of the spell and their reaction to the spell being countered versus a figure like we see on the Amonkhet Invocation, where we're seeing the person countering the spell. So we don't see the caster in this version, but we do see someone, and often these effects, when you show the person wielding the counter magic, they don't look like they're putting in that much effort.
Oh, okay. Yep.
It's framed as more of like, this is easy for me. This is nothing. You put all of your energy, all of your resources into casting this big flashy spell, and I'm going to counter it with just 2 blue. So we see this figure here who's encased in a bubble, and they're holding up their hand, but there's no real energy there. It feels very like, no. No, get out of here with that.
Yep.
We see that again there's one further down from a dual deck with Jace on it. This is another one where we see the person wielding the counter magic. And this one's kind of informed with the flavor text informs a bit of what's going on here and kind of leads us into the red versus blue enemy color dynamic that we're going to look at a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
The pyromancer summoned up her mightiest onslaught of fire and rage, and Jace feigned interest.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of see that over and over again in the mood of a lot of these pieces. And he does look like he's putting a little bit more effort into this one, but it is still basically, he's standing there holding out his hand and just sweeping away this fiery cloud in front of him.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like the energy used to counter the spell matches the energy used to create the spell being countered. So it's less of a clash and more of a dismissal.
And is this a secret lair?
I believe, yes. This last one is a secret lair. And again, we have someone who looks fairly unimpressed with what's happening. Casually, they're not... We see this in a few more arts that I've selected too, where the counter spell wielder isn't even looking in the direction of the spell being cast at them. It's not even worth their glance.
But I'm keying in on the flavor text.
Yeah, if only there were a way to counter your inevitable whining.
Wow. Yeah.
So that kind of gives you an idea
Shade.
of the... Yeah, there's a lot of shade being thrown on these counterspell flavor texts. But let's look at some enemy color stuff. So within the color pie, if you look at the backside of a magic card, we have the 5 colors of magic positioned in a very specific way.
Mm-hmm.
And we have enemy colors, which are often kind of exploring similar themes, like black and green, both kind of deal with reclamation, but have different philosophies about how that works.
Okay.
Blue and red are strongly associated with instants and sorceries. They kind of play around with those things in different ways.
Ephemeral magic as opposed to permanence.
Yeah, red has a lot of artifact affinity. Like, that's not all they're known for, but they do both have these kind of ephemeral... Red has a lot of copy spells, copy magic. So when you add them together, you can do some real bonkers copy spell shenanigans. They're common, Izzet and Prismari are kind of commonly associated with those kinds of deck builds where we're playing a lot of instants and sorceries. We might be multiplying them or, using that to generate some absurd advantage.
Yeah.
But at their core, they're kind of looking, their blue is more about control, intellect. It's basically mind, head over heart.
Mm-hmm.
Red is more about passion, impulse, a little bit of chaos. So they're kind of two different philosophies looking at the same thing, or looking at it through a different lens. This particular pair of pieces that I picked out from M25 shows a really interesting take on that with the hand positioning. So both of these are mirrored pieces. You have the red one shows someone casting this fiery bolt of energy. They're kind of holding their hand like this, and it looks like they're missing their index finger or part of their index finger.
Yeah.
And then you have the blue background. On the blue side of things, you have someone holding their hand in kind of an opposite gesture, index finger extended, their other 3 fingers kind of pointing down. And same thing, we have this sort of... Blue is also often depicted in these cards with more aquatic imagery, and red is often shown as fire or lava or something of that nature. So it almost looks like waves or watery, ephemeral stuff. I don't know what that is, but it's interesting to see them side by side and see how... These are both by the same artist, see how that's depicted. Similar with Pyroblast and Hydroblast, we have 2 opposing figures. We have kind of the fire versus water again. Pyroblast has this really cool dragon in the background. I'm kind of sad that the Hydroblast sorcerer didn't get like a sea serpent or something to match that energy, but she has this big giant wave. That's cool. But again, these are both targeted, so these are real specific counter target spell if it's blue or red, so they only work on each other.
Yeah.
We do see that repeated in a few other ways throughout the game. There is a card called Death Grip, if we look a little ahead a little bit, and we just looked at the other one. There's a green version of this.
Life Force.
Life Force.
Yeah, and I think this ties it comes from the counterspell is an overlapping concept, but just early game, as you mentioned, the enemy colors as determined by where the colors sit on the 5-color penta. It's not a pentagram, a penta.
Yeah, it's kind of
the 5-pointed star, whatever it is that's on the back of the card.
I mean, it forms a pentagon.
Yeah, okay.
If you draw lines between them, I don't know.
Getting way off on a tangent here.
Yeah.
But being an enemy color was far more meaningful in the beginning of the game in alpha.
Yeah.
Because like right now, enemy and ally colors, being an enemy or an ally, it's doesn't really mean anything. It's just like, we get wedge sets versus shard sets.
You have fewer opportunities to fix your lands.
Yeah.
Your mana base is worse
Sometimes.
generally, or it costs you a lot more money.
But there are a lot of just hate cards in alpha.
There's real specific counter target color.
Black cards exist to hate on white and to hate on green specifically, whereas black doesn't have those cards that just will absolutely hose blue or red because they're its ally colors. Same for each set of enemies and allies. And so blue and red, that red elemental blast and blue elemental blast, it's very significant and kind of predictable that those exist to hose the other color exactly in a kind of equal but opposite
it's just like perfectly symmetrical violence. This doesn't work on any other color.
I mean, some of the other colors, I'm sorry, I'm getting way off, but like Tsunami, destroy all islands, a green spell, and I think Boil, Boil would have done the same thing. They have a bunch of those type of effects.
Yeah, we see that repeated in a multiple way. Like if you look through a lot of old cards, you'll see these real specific, usually enemy color just hosers. Like this is just going to screw over this other color.
Yep.
Which is kind of interesting. Like we were talking about earlier, how in the early game you didn't have a sideboard.
Right.
So the decision to include these cards was very intentional
in the design of alpha. Right.
Like as though you know who you're going to be playing. Yeah. Otherwise, why would you run this?
They were always
like it's going to be a dead card.
They seem like they were pressure valves in case a meta got really weird.
Yeah.
And there was this really overpowered green player, so you got to bring in these death grips.
We all got to bring death grip, I guess.
Yeah.
It's kind of an interesting perspective when you think about now versus then. Like, if you were running this, it was with the intent that you were going to play it. This isn't something you're sideboarding in if you happen to get matched up with a green player.
Yeah. The deck construction rules were so different at the beginning. It was 40 cards, like a limited deck now, but it was just that was the minimum, and there was no 4-of rule. That was like a side effect of the tournament scene that emerged pretty quickly, but like it was not there in the first rulebook. It's just 40 cards, you got them, play them.
Yeah, so many things have changed since then. Like availability of cards via the internet has made things very
knowing
different.
what the cards that are available
knowing what they are, having a comprehensive list of everything you could acquire.
But there in the beginning were the elemental blasts common, showing you this animosity between the colors and letting you counter things that interrupt speed.
Yes,
which is another weird part of that.
Yeah, another thing that is no longer part of the game.
Yeah, and I am prone to going off of tangents. Keep it real simple. It's just an instant now. Interrupts and instants are basically the same thing. They overcomplicated it because they felt like there needed to be a different speed at which counterspells worked.
Yeah, it's like hyper speed.
It works fine to have them all instants.
Yeah, it works just fine.
Yeah.
But anyway, we digress. Outside of red and blue, there are other ways we can counter magic. There's enchantments. We have a really fun card I found from Legends called In the Eye of Chaos, and this is a world enchantment, which I didn't know about because I started playing Magic when Khans of Tarkir came out. So this functions kind of like the way the legend rule has changed. We'll get into that if you want to. But basically the way this works is if I play a world enchantment and then you play a world enchantment, the old one goes away. So it's going to hold on to whatever the newest...
And this has not been eroded away, right?
No, these just don't get played very often.
And they don't make new ones.
So it doesn't come up. These mostly were printed in Legends and Mirage, and there was a few sprinkled shortly after that. But like these are relics of the very early era of the game. This is not something that has continued.
The set Legends premiered all the idea of one-off cards, and so Legends, like an individual summon legend, if your opponent had one, you summon the same one, they all die. Was how it worked back then. And in the same, I think part of the same sense is this idea of creating, I don't know why they didn't call them a legendary enchantment, but It was the same spirit of
Yeah.
there can only be
There
one
can
of
only be
this
one of
thing.
these.
How cool
You
is
can't
that?
have duplicates. You can't double up on this effect.
Yeah.
I mean, this is pretty bonkers if you could double it.
Yeah.
It basically makes all instants and interrupts cost double, or they're just automatically countered, including your own. So you're kind of hamstringing yourself if you play this, but maybe that's worth it if you're up against a deck that's really leaning heavily on those cards.
Is this an insanely expensive reserve list card now?
I think it is reserve list. I did not look up how much this costs. I have no idea.
You want to find out?
Yeah,
right now?
let's find out. How much does it? Can we buy this card today?
I bet no.
Let's find out.
In the Eye of Chaos, though.
I know it's a reserve list item.
Oh,
Okay, it's only $103 for a moderately played copy. That's not horrible.
Yeah. I was sure it was going to be over 300.
But yeah, imagine.
You should get one.
I should get one. I deserve it.
Anyway.
Yeah, I learned something new about world enchantments and how those work, and that never really comes up because no one plays them.
Except
so,
Concordant Crossroads,
yeah.
But since it's the only one...
It doesn't come up. We
Yeah.
don't have to deal with having
So
multiples.
if you're tired of people playing Concordant Crossroads, you put in the Eye of Chaos in your deck,
pick one of
it'll
those
kick
up.
that one off the board and you're set.
Yeah, because there's no easier way to deal with that problem. But anyway,
This is the most fun way.
it is the most fun. It's definitely the most stylish way to deal with it.
Here's my
and-
$100 rectangle.
Yes. Yeah, just if you want to get your friend group's respect, that's how you do that. We also have some creatures that counter spells or have a counterspell type ability. Most of them are not great as creatures. They're not going to be doing a lot of attacking for you. That's not really what they're meant to do. But as we kind of move through this, we'll see, generally the costs associated with these cards are higher for a worse or more targeted effect. So we have cards like Vidalian Mage. This one is from Fallen Empires. And there's 3 different versions of this, which was true, I think, of all the cards in that set.
All the commons,
All
I
the
think.
commons,
I think all
yes.
the uncommons. There were only commons and uncommons. There were 8-card packs. The uncommons did not have multiple arts, I think, but there were like 2 to 4 arts for the commons.
Yeah, which is really fun. I mean, if you're cracking packs at that time,
Oh,
you're
yeah.
getting all these different iterations of the
And
same
they had
card.
such a wide variety of flavor text that really build the world up. Since a lot of the flavor text was excerpts from books.
Oh, that's
from
cool.
From
I
the
didn't realize
history
that.
of the Sarbadian empires, I think.
That's neat.
It was cool. I learned a lot about thrulls. Anyway.
Thrull studies. So this features a merfolk kind of holding up or enchanting what I presume is a goblin based on the flavor text. About how he's like, come back, cowards, everyone knows merfolk can't wield magic, and then I assume this is like 5 seconds later, this is what we're seeing. So we
that's
have this
funny.
gigantic merfolk guy who's just, again, kind of effortlessly dealing with this problem.
Yeah. It is a
Again,
theme.
we don't see, there isn't a lot of emotion in these pieces from the blue perspective. There isn't a lot of effort being put forth. It's very dismissive. And he's looking head on at the viewer, which is kind of a neat artistic choice. He's not even interested in this little goblin that he's enchanted. He's focused on you. Casting cost-wise, this isn't great. It only counters a target spell if the caster doesn't pay an additional 1. But sometimes that's all you need.
Yeah.
So.
But a 1/1 for 3, you could get a prodigal sorcerer to ping things in blue at this point.
Yeah,
So,
it's not a great rate, but we also have creatures like Curse Catcher. This one, again, it only costs 1. It's a 1/1 for 1, so not bad stats. And then it has the ability you can sack this to counter an instant or sorcery unless the controller pays 1. And I really like the art here, how you see the merfolk kind of, he's catching something. It looks like a little, like a pearl or something that's lit up from within.
Yeah.
I like the flavor text on this, that of all the things that can be stolen, opportunity is the most valuable. I kind of wish there was more of a hint that this is potentially fatal for him, because he does have to die to counter the spell, but that might be asking too much. We're already trying to depict magic not happening.
Maybe he's more like, I paid my debt, I'm leaving.
Perhaps.
I just wanted to try a voice.
He's
Sorry.
done his thing. He's out.
Yeah.
Speaking of thralls,
Yes.
Let's move on to Thrull Wizard.
Ah, okay.
Just a real nasty boy. We love him.
Sarpadian Empires.
Yeah! What we were just talking about. So, yeah, beautiful.
Another random side. I do not understand still why the whoever was in charge of creative for Magic for the first 7 years decided that despite being set in a multiverse, every set was going to be at a different time and place on Dominaria. They just kept doing that. Like, okay, I say just later on Dominaria. Mirage, it's in a different place on Dominaria. Yep. And the Sarpadian Empires, the Fallen Empires, is just, here's this dilapidated island on Dominaria.
Also on Dominaria.
Yep. Eventually they made it out.
Took a while for that to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, honestly, and this is another real aside, it might have been partly because people got confused because the original name of the multiverse was Dominia. And the plane was Dominaria, and they sound really similar. So,
yeah.
Could people have actually just it seems crazy that the creative team who works on this product professionally would get confused by that, but I don't have a better explanation for this.
Yeah,
recurring everything's on the same place in this giant.
That is interesting,
never-ending...
though. That I mean, how long does it take them to get off of Dominaria? When does...
So, I mean, Antiquities mentions Yawgmoth and Phyrexia, but I don't think they hadn't defined what that meant at the time. I think all the actual cool explanation
Yawgmoth is originally from
Dominaria,
yeah.
So that story starts there too.
We don't know that at the time, but still, yeah, we're back in Dominaria.
Yeah, well,
anyway.
No, Arabian Nights is on... They named it something slightly different.
That one does have a different name.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But then the next 12 sets were all there. And I think it wasn't maybe until Mercadian Masks that they go to and punch through to a different plane. And yeah. And then it all cycles back to trying to invade Dominaria.
And then we're back to Dominaria. So. Anyway.
But
yes, thrulls. Beautiful, toothy, rubbery looking thrulls. Love this. So it's a 1/1, costs 3, real bad. Has an activated ability, which this one only counters a black spell if the caster of that spell does not pay an additional black or 3. So we're paying a pretty steep cost here. We're kind of outside the... Black is... When I think of black, or I try to explain black to somebody, black is the color that can kind of do everything at a cost.
Yeah.
There's nothing black can't do, but sometimes the cost is pretty steep.
Yeah.
So this is a good example of that. We can still counter a black spell. We're still kind of restricted there. But we do have some other stuff like Imp's Mischief that can redirect things. Black can dabble in this space as well. It just generally does so at a steeper cost.
Yeah. Fair enough.
And yeah, just I wanted to take a minute to just appreciate how beautiful this thrall is. Really enjoy these horrible creatures.
Really cool.
It is! I'm actually building an old school Thralls deck right now, so very excited.
Oh, nice.
But speaking of kind of outside the color pie, we also have some artifacts that can do this, so you can counter magic without any colors at all. But it's going to cost you. And Ring of Immortals is one I included just because I thought this was interesting that we can see this effect completely outside of color. The art, again, we have a hand. We have the energy, kind of a lightning going toward it. So that's kind of persisted throughout the counter magic depictions. This is real steep cost, real bad. You pay 5 and then you pay 3 and tap this to counter an interrupter enchantment, and it can only counter spells which target a permanent you control.
Okay, now that's the real important clause. Up till then, it felt like it might have some use.
Yeah, no, it's got to be something that is coming after your stuff. It's real specific, very expensive.
I'm highly confident they eroded it to be counters instants or enchantments.
I would hope so.
But still,
actually, I think it's better if it only counters interrupts.
Most interrupts wouldn't even be able to do that.
That's true. It's not good.
Because most interrupts were counterspells or that kind of thing, and this can only counter one that targets a permanent. And so usually it's going to be a disenchant or something that's not an interrupt. It's going to be an
very
instant.
Specific, very high cost.
Wow.
Another one that has a little bit more use and has some a really interesting illustration is Null Brooch.
Oh,
For
yeah.
4, and
I
then you pay 2
love
and
this.
tap it. You have to discard your hand, but that could be advantageous
What if
depending
you don't
on
have a
what you're
hand
doing.
already? Because that
If
was
you
something you
don't
took
have a
care
hand,
of.
yeah, maybe that's fine. Maybe you
Yeah.
don't have a hand, but you pay 2, tap, discard your hand, and you can counter a non-creature spell. So we're still a little bit restricted outside of colored.
You know what non-creature spells are going to be doing? They're going to try and destroy this Null Brooch. And
That's
this Null
true.
Brooch is going to say, no.
Yeah.
No to that shatter. No to that disenchant. This is a good card.
And a beautiful flavor text. Give away everything so that others have nothing. And lovely art. I really like this creepy little figure showing off what I presume is the Null Brooch.
I love this.
Quite proudly. I mean, I would too if I had that.
Is this an expensive reserved list card? I feel
That's
like
a great
no.
question. I think the answer is no, but let's find out.
78 cents. I have to buy a
That
bunch
is-
of these
that
before
is-
this video goes live, so everyone tries to get their own.
We're gonna buy out all of them. when the price spikes, you'll know why. I think there were a few more things that I wanted to look at before we kind of wrap this up. Again, we have some other depictions. Full Summoning was a blue sorcery
This is the same
speed.
artist as Null Brooch.
It is!
And it's also fantastic.
It is. It's also wonderful. You play this in response to another player playing a creature. The creature card has no effect, and that player puts it into their graveyard. And
I love Portal.
yeah, just beautiful art of this. I feel like the magic happening here is transversing this goblin's body and taking his soul with it.
Oh, this is cool. This is
Yeah.
really quite unique.
Really unique in terms of counter magic that we've looked at so far. Very specific, so it has to be something it's got to target, or it doesn't actually target. It might actually in the eroded text. I don't know what that's
Oh, I'm
been
sure. I mean,
changed
this
to.
is just Oh, we see this is reprinted in half the sets ever. As it's the opposite of negate. It's just essence.
Oh yeah, essence scatter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is just essence scatter.
Yeah.
It's a functional reprint of that, except they phrased everything different in Portal
Yes.
because they only had like 3 card types, and so they didn't have instants.
Yeah.
And so instead the point of Portal was supposed to be it's so simple, it's easier to introduce new people to it. But
because
they
it was
really
almost
overcomplicated things.
like,
a lot
oh,
of
this is
ways.
more beginner friendly, but is it really?
Yeah. But let's look up the Oracle text now.
Okay, let's see what they have changed this to say. Counter target creature spell.
There you go.
That's a lot more elegant.
Yep, instant. And
Yeah.
it's the same as Essence Scatter, right? Yep.
Nope, that's the same.
Yeah.
It is functionally exactly
But this
the
is
same.
the best art of Essence Scatter
It is.
ever.
It is beautiful.
I wonder how much that one costs. I got some shopping to do later.
Yeah, later we'll put together a little curated list of cards you should go buy right now after watching this video. Another one I really liked while I was looking through these was Intervene. This one counters target spell that targets a creature. So real specific.
But real cheap.
But real cheap, so that's fine. And really interesting art. There's so much going on here that at first it kind of took me a second of looking at this to appreciate it. There's 2 of these like kind of fairies or sprites up in the corner, top and bottom corner. And it looks like they're causing some mischief potentially. I feel like they're the ones countering.
Or those aren't the protectors.
I don't think so, but
Okay.
maybe I'm wrong about that.
It's hard to say.
It's hard to say. They're either causing the mischief or they're protecting this unsuspecting man.
Mm-hmm.
Hard to say.
Yeah.
But I love the colors here. And I like this angle that we're looking, because initially I didn't really appreciate their significance in the composition.
Mm-hmm.
I mostly saw the guy and the lightning bolt shape at the top.
Yeah.
And then I kind of took in like, oh, actually there's these little tiny creatures that are interacting here. And I think you're right. It looks like there's some kind of shield being cast that's stopping this unsuspecting victim from getting bolted, probably.
Yeah. But I really don't know if it's the fairies who are doing the bolting or the shielding. But
Yeah.
the flavor text implies it's Karn.
Yeah. But I really like it. I like the little bubbles we see around them. Just really pretty art. Burnout is another interesting one. So this is another spell. This is a red spell that is made to hose blue spells. Interesting thing about the art here is I was looking at it and it took me a second to realize, oh, there's There's absolutely no blue in this art. The blue has been utterly obliterated. Earlier when we looked at other targeted removal spells, or like Death Grip even, you see like a lot of the opposite color in the background. Like Death Grip has a lot of green in the background. Hydroblast, Pyroblast, we see the red, blue. I think Hydroblast less so. Maybe, yeah, that's not a good example. But the Elemental Blast, like you can see what they're targeting.
Yeah.
This one, absolutely no blue. It's gone. It's over.
I'm just looking through the revised set right now to look at blue interrupts and verify my recollection that by and large they're just counterspells, and that's pretty much right. It's pretty much just the counterspells, and this is from a few sets later, so there might have been a little more variety.
Sure.
But this basically was just a counter for counterspells, and the other things that were interrupts were like magical hack and sleight of mind, which changed the colors of cards and basic land types.
Well, and I was thinking about more modern gameplay, but I mean, hasn't Red Deck Wins basically been an archetype for most of the game? Kind of having like fast, aggressive creatures. Blue is not really known for having fast, aggressive creatures. Yeah. So in a blue-red matchup, counter magic would be your answer to a lot of what Red is trying to do.
So this is a sideboard
this
card.
Kind of makes sense that this would be, if you're running the aggro Red deck, this is your answer to that matchup of someone just countering all your little critters.
Yeah. And talking about red counter spells that work well in Red Deck Wins.
Yeah. We've got Mage's Contest, which has some really dramatic art between these two guys. So this one's fun. It's a 3-drop instant. You and target spell's controller bid your life, and you go in this little bidding war in turn order until the highest bid stands. And if you win the bid, you counter the spell. If your opponent wins, they get their spell, but they lose however much life they bid. So it's kind of a win-win.
And if like I was saying, if you're playing Red Deck Wins, your opponent cannot afford often to put themselves in a low life total. They can't go down to 3 because you could just bolt them and win.
Like that's not great for them.
If you're the red player, you're happy either way.
Like there seems like kind of a no downside situation for you, but I love the depiction of these two sorcerers or wizards, perhaps planeswalkers, I don't know who they are, just staring daggers into each other in the form of what looks like their life energy being expelled through their eyes.
That's awkward. That seems real uncomfortable.
It's a very dramatic depiction of what's going on here. But yeah, what a fun card. I feel like this seems like one of those fun cards that I could see like some of our friends running in Commander just for laughs.
Yeah.
It feels
like
that.
Not great, but it's gonna be fun.
It's gonna be a fun time. It's gonna be a fun time for someone. We have some other fun ones here before we finish up. Override was another card. This one is kind of like a reverse affinity effect. So this one counters a spell unless its controller pays 1 for each artifact you control. And it references Knowledge Pool. Which is... It's funny that Knowledge Pool has all the answers, especially no, because what you probably want to do is say no to Knowledge Pool if you get the chance.
Especially if they're playing a 7-player Commander game.
Absolutely. I would hope at least 2 people would say no to Knowledge Pool.
Yeah, that might cause the game to last for 5 hours.
You know,
that could happen.
That could happen to someone.
Yep.
But yeah, I really like this art. I love this art here and how, again, this guy's kind of framing it. It's a sort of a defensive pose.
He's T-posing.
He is T-posing. This is perfect for your T-pose tribal deck. Or T-pose typal. Sorry, we eroded that. We don't call it that anymore. But that's a thing, you know, you could run that. You could run this guy in it. I like how we have the little lines of connecting blue energy between these tiny little artifact objects sort of hovering around him. And again, like, I don't feel like he's putting in a lot of effort here. This feels, you know, he's drawing energy, he's drawing power off of his artifact collection. This isn't about him summoning...
This is a metaphor for Magic players.
It is. This is us. This is us. This is us.
Audience insert.
But yeah, you know, he's drawing his power from his collection. It's not about some kind of like internal fortitude or wellspring of energy that he has. Yeah, this I'm gonna have to, again, you should probably go buy this, because I'm gonna go buy one after this. And then last but certainly not least, I wanted to look at Laquatus's Disdain. So I included this card for a couple of reasons. For number one, it has a cephalid on it, which I'm excited about because I really like them.
It's real subtle in the background there. I'm glad you noticed that.
Yes, he is back. I mean, I'm always looking for cephalids.
Good. Yeah. You should be.
And this is a great depiction of a couple things. First of all, the dismissive nature of the blue player. The cephalid is putting everything he has into casting this enormous spell, and Laquatus is dismissively pushing it aside. He's not even looking in the direction of the spell. He's not stopping. He's reading a letter, and he's not even going to stop doing that to just stop this minor annoyance behind him. And then we have the flavor text to go with it. The first time was amusing, but now you're getting tiresome. Yeah. And that pretty much sums up the vibe, the energy, attitude. The blue attitude, or at least what they're known for. I don't know, we've discussed that there is more to blue than just petty counter magic, but it is a big aspect of the play style. You can also draw cards, though, so that's cool. And that card draws you cards. It does both the things! This is the archetypal... It kind of is. Is this the archetypal blue card?
I think it is. It's a pity that it's identified with a specific legendary character, so they can't reprint it over and over and over.
No, and it's also real specific. It only counters spells played from a graveyard.
Yeah, okay. So this is super niche.
It doesn't have a lot of applications, but I love the art, and I really wish this art was on more cards, like maybe Counterspell. Maybe we could have a promo of Counterspell with this, or like a redraw of this. I don't know.
Yeah, proxy this up, just like...
I can do that.
Yeah, you can.
You've seen the Edgar Markov I chopped apart, right? Maybe you haven't.
I know about it.
Oh.
Anyway.
Anyhow.
No.